How a YouTuber's honor killing exposed Iraq's outdated laws. Tiba Al Ali, a vivacious YouTuber, relocated from Iraq to Turkey and shared her experiences with a broad online audience. During a return visit to her hometown, uh, Diwaniya in Iraq, she was tragically strangled in her sleep by her father, Tayyip Ali. Shockingly, he received a mere 6-month prison sentence due to Iraq's lenient stance on honor killings. Article 409 of the Iraqi Penal Code, for instance, permits reduced punishments for those who commit violent acts against family members if they quote unquote had honorable motives or were quote provoked by perceived acts of dishonor. Dr. Leyla Hussein, a human rights activist, commented on the deep-rooted misogyny of such actions, noting, quote, "These killings are often rooted in misogyny and a desire to control women's bodies and behavior." Tiba's heartbreaking story, combined with the controversy of Article 409, has catalyzed a wave of protests and demands for legal reform in Iraq, spotlighting the country's urgent need to ensure better protection for women. So, this is obviously heartbreaking. It's so this is so disgusting on so many levels. One, so part of the contention or argument with her family seems to have been she originally left Iraq to go to Turkey to further her education, and then she stayed because she enjoyed the life that she could have there more. And so they didn't like that she left Iraq to go to Turkey. And they also seem to have some they didn't like that she had a Syrian fiance, or they didn't like who her fiance was. And for this, she was murdered in her sleep by her own father. And for this, I mean, it's it's so obtuse to be like, "Oh, well he gets a 6-month sentence because he was provoked by how she dishonored him." Provoked into strangling her in her sleep when you're literally the most vulnerable and defenseless. It's it's like beyond shameful and mind numbing. Um Armin, I would love to get your quick reaction while I look for another piece about this story that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I just want to remind people that this is because of Islam, okay? This is not just because of politics. This is not just because of culture. This is not just because of socioeconomic factors. All of those things are factors, of course. They all have an influence, but also, and mostly, I would say, it's because of Islam. This is definitely Islam. And don't let anybody tell you that it's not Islam because Islam considers to be a sin. It is true that Islam considers this act of violence to be a sin. However, Islam also makes this possible because Islam considers the punishment for a father to kill that kills their own daughter to be very low. If he killed his son, the punishment would be significantly higher Islamically. Islam also promotes honor culture, and Islam also allows, and no, it does not allow, it commands beating women. So, given the normalization of violence against women in Islam, given the normalization of honor culture in Islam, and given the low punishment for killing girls and women in Islam, these together does cause events like this to happen. So some Muslims would try to come and say this has nothing to do with Islam because Islam considers to be a sin. It's true that Islam considers to be a sin, but that does not mean Islam is not because of those three things. So they ignore these three other things that I told you. You know, the fact that you do not get punished much. Like if you say like you are trying to cleanse your family's honor, and you also look at the punishment for an act like this, and you see your family's honor is worth 6 months, 8 months in prison. It's nothing. The punishment is very low, so they will go with it. If the punishment was higher, a lot of these events would be not happening. It will still happen, but it will be much lower. Right? So this is definitely because of Islam. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree, and I want it because, and that's as evidenced as the way that these laws are even put in the penal code. So here's an example, and here's a quote from the article. For instance, Article 41 of Iraq's penal code, quote, the punishment of a wife by her husband and the disciplining of parents, excuse me, quote, the disciplining by parents of children under their authority within certain limits are considered legal rights. So punishments of wives and children within quote unquote certain limits are legal rights.
Wow.
Article 409, meanwhile, states, quote, any person who surprises his wife in the act of adultery or finds one of his female dependents in bed with her lover and kills them immediately, or one of them, or assaults one of them so that he or she dies or is left permanently disabled, is punishable by a period of detention not exceeding 3 years. And it's very clear this is about your wife or female dependents. So, because you had the misfortune of just happening to be born female in this country, your life is worth less and you are afforded less legal protection under the law simply by virtue of your sex that you were born with, that you had no control over. And your subjugation is therefore justified and validated and legitimized by the state itself. Which, yeah, it just pisses me off so much. And I think it's kind of partially because lately I've been thinking in my mind about women's rights through the lens of individual liberty. And for me, it's interesting when you think about it that way, because you're like, okay, so this person is afforded less liberty and protection by the state by mere misfortune of their sex, right? Instead of framing it through like a sociological, patriarchal lens necessarily. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's horrible and it's disappointing, but it's important that we talk about these things because we have to remember that this is something that thousands, hundreds of thousands of people live with as a daily reality around the world. And these laws have consequences.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't know what else to say. Sorry that we have to cover a story like this. Sorry, guys.
No, but it's important. It's important.
Yeah. Oh, we did have some comments from Secular Sakai that I don't know if we highlighted this one. Do you want to read this one?
Yes. Oh yeah, Sakai is saying small aside about Rwanda. Oh, this was about our last segment. Paul, ooh, this is tough. Ruse Abagina, the man from Hotel Rwanda, was finally released from prison in Rwanda. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Through a lot of diplomatic negotiating, yeah.
Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.